Serial killers have been a source of fascination and horror for decades, with their gruesome crimes capturing the public's attention and imagination. Some of the most notorious serial killers in history have been caught and brought to justice, but others, like the ones we will discuss here, have remained elusive, their identities and motives unknown. In this video, we'll explore the top 15 unsolved serial killer mysteries of all time. From the infamous Zodiac Killer to lesser known, but no less chilling cases. So get ready to be on the edge of your seat, guys. Who knows, maybe one of you will be the key to solving one of these cases. Keep your eyes peeled and your thinking caps on. 15. Mad Gasser of Mattoon, Mattoon, Illinois, United States. 1944. The Mad Gasser of Mattoon was the name given to the person or people believed to be responsible for a series of apparent gas attacks that occurred in Mattoon, Illinois, during the mid-1940s. More than 24 separate cases of gassings were reported to police over the span of 2 weeks, in addition to many more reported sightings of the suspected assailant. Police remained skeptical of the accounts throughout the entire incident, as no physical evidence was ever found. The attacks are widely considered to be a case of mass hysteria, but others maintain that the Mad Gasser actually existed, or that the perceived attacks have another explanation, such as industrial pollution. 14. Axeman of New Orleans. New Orleans, United States. 1918 to 1919. The Axeman of New Orleans was an unidentified serial killer who operated from May 1918 to October 1919, targeting Italian immigrants and Italian Americans with an axe or straight razor. The killer was never caught or identified, and the murders remain unsolved. The motive for the killings is unknown, and several theories have been proposed, including ethnic or racial hatred, sexual sadism, and a bizarre attempt to promote jazz music. Many of the victims were attacked in their homes at night, with a panel on a back door of a home removed by a chisel. The crimes were not motivated by robbery, and the perpetrator never removed items from his victims' homes. The chief suspect in the crimes was Frank Doc Mumphrey, who used the alias Leon Joseph Manfer. However, there is no concrete evidence linking him to the murders. 13. The Flat Tire Murders, Southern United States, 1975 to 1976. The Flat Tire Murders were a series of unsolved murders of young women in South Florida between February 1975 and January 1976. The perpetrator was believed to have deflated the tires of the victims' cars before offering to fix them and then abducting and killing the women. There were 12 suspected victims, and forensic experts have debated whether there was one killer or many. The first 2 victims were found naked in a canal, while others were shot or beaten to death. The killer was described as a white male with an above-average IQ and a sexual sadist. The murders may have been connected to similar killings in other states, leading some to believe that the same perpetrator could have killed over 30 women. The murders remain unsolved. 12. The Honolulu Strangler. Honolulu, Hawaii, United States. 1985 to 1986. The Honolulu Strangler is an unidentified serial killer responsible for the deaths of 5 women in Hawaii from 1985 to 1986. The police established a 27-person task force with the FBI and Green River Task Force to catch the killer, who targeted vulnerable women at bus stops. After one victim was found, witnesses described a light-colored van and a Caucasian or mixed-race man with her car. Howard Gay was arrested as the primary suspect but was released after interrogation and a failed polygraph test. 2 months after his arrest, a witness identified him as the man seen with one victim but refused to testify. Gay died in 2003, and the case remains unsolved. 11. The Phantom Killer, Texarkana, Texas, United States. 1946. The Phantom of Texarkana, or the Phantom Killer, is a hypothetical perpetrator accused of the Texarkana Moonlight Murders that occurred in 1946 in and around Texarkana, Arkansas and Texas. The killer is believed to have attacked 8 people, 5 of whom died, in a 10-week period. The murders caused a state of panic in Texarkana, with residents arming themselves and police patrolling the streets. Investigations were conducted of all levels of law enforcement, and the prime suspect was Yowell Swinney, who was linked to the murders by circumstantial evidence and his wife's statements. Swinney was not charged with murder but was convicted of other crimes. The case inspired many works, including the 1976 film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. 10. The Bible Belt Strangler. Southern United States. 1970s to 1980s. The Redhead Murders is a series of unsolved homicides of red-headed females in the United States between 1978 and 1992. The killer was named the Bible Belt Strangler in 2018 because the territory where the bodies were found was part of the Bible Belt. The victims, many remaining unidentified for years, were usually women with reddish hair whose bodies were abandoned along major highways in the United States. Authorities are unsure how many people were responsible for these murders, if they were all performed by the same perpetrator, and how many victims there have been. It is believed that there may have been a total of 5 to 14 victims. A possible suspect emerged circa 1985, but he was later dismissed from the case. Another suspect was also questioned but dismissed. 9. The West Mesa Bone Collector. Albuquerque, New Mexico, United States. 2001 to 2005. The West Mesa murders refer to the killings of 11 women in Albuquerque, New Mexico, whose remains were found buried in 2009. While several suspects have been named, none have been arrested or charged. The murders were initially believed to be the work of a serial killer, but the involvement of a sex trafficking ring has also been suspected. Police have linked the murders to a suspect from Central America and have also suspected the involvement of a sex trafficking ring operating through neighboring Texas. The women were buried between 2001 and 2005 in an undeveloped area within city limits, but the site was disturbed and buried for residential development. The remains were discovered in 2009 after a woman walking a dog found a human bone on the West Mesa. The victims were mostly Hispanic, between the ages of 15 and 32, and involved with drugs and sex work. 8. The Colonial Parkway Killer. Virginia, United States. 1986 to 1989. The Colonial Parkway murders were a series of at least 8 killings, believed to be the work of a serial killer, that occurred between 1986 and 1989 along the Colonial Parkway in southeast Virginia. The killer targeted young couples in their vehicles parked in isolated locations, taking the lives of 6 confirmed victims and a missing couple who are presumed dead. The victims were killed by strangulation, gunshot, or stabbing, and there was no evidence of burglary or sexual assault, and no suspects have ever been publicly identified. 7. The Doodler. San Francisco, California, United States. 1974 to 1975. The Doodler is an unidentified serial killer responsible for up to 16 murders and 3 assaults of men in San Francisco between 1974 and 1975. The victims were white males who were stabbed after being met at gay nightclubs, bars, and restaurants. The suspect was described as a black man between 19 and 25 years of age, about 6 feet tall with a slender build. The Doodler's first victim was Gerald Kavanagh, followed by Joseph J. Stevens, Klaus Christman, Frederick Kappen, Warren Andrews, and Harold Gullberg. The killer sketched his victims before the murders, hence the nickname the Doodler. The case remains unsolved. 6. The Servant Girl Annihilator. Austin, Texas, United States. 1884 to 1885. The Servant Girl Annihilator was an unidentified serial killer who murdered 7 women, 5 black, 2 white, and 1 black man, seriously injured 6 women and 2 men in Austin, Texas, between 1884 and 1885. All the victims were attacked indoors while asleep in their beds, and 5 of the women were dragged outside and killed. The murders ended with the killing of 2 white women on December 24, 1885. The killer was never identified, and only one of those arrested was convicted, but later had his conviction overturned. The murders are considered an early example of a serial killer operating in the United States. Some people believed that the killer had magic powers that enabled him to become invisible. The series of murders stopped when additional police officers were hired, rewards were offered, and citizens formed a vigilance committee to patrol the streets at night. 5. The Monster of Florence. Florence, Italy. 1968 to 1985. The Monster of Florence was an unidentified serial killer active in the province of Florence, Italy, between 1968 and 1985. The killer murdered 14 victims, usually young couples, in wooded areas during new moons. Law enforcement conducted several investigations into the cases over the years. In 2000, courts convicted 2 individuals for 4 of the double homicides. Multiple weapons were used in the murders, including a .22 caliber Beretta handgun and a knife. In half of the cases, sex organs were excised from the bodies of female victims, which appeared to be the motive for the crimes. 4. The Long Island Serial Killer. Long Island, New York, United States. 1990s to 2010s. The Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer, the Manorville Butcher, and the Craigslist Ripper, is an unidentified suspected serial killer who is believed to have killed between 10 and 17 people over nearly 20 years and disposed of the bodies in South Shore of Long Island. Most of the known victims were sex workers who advertised on Craigslist. The victims' remains were found between December 2010 and April 2011 after the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert led to a police search of the area along the Ocean Parkway near Gilgo and Oak Beach in Suffolk County. The FBI officially joined the investigation in December 2015, one day after former police chief James Burke, who was reported to have blocked FBI involvement in the case for years, was indicted for civil rights violations and conspiracy. In September 2017, John Bittrolf, a carpenter from Manorville in Long Island, was named as a suspect in at least one of the murders. All the murders, however, remain unsolved till date. 3. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. Cleveland, Ohio, United States. 1930s. The Cleveland Torso Murderer, or the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, was a serial killer who was active in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s. The killer was responsible for the dismemberment and murder of at least 12 victims, mostly drifters and lower-class individuals who lived in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run. The killer was known for beheading and often dismembering his victims, occasionally severing the victim's torso in half or severing their appendages. Most of the male victims were also castrated. Despite an investigation led by famed lawman Elliot Ness, the killer was never caught and the murders remain unsolved. The killer taunted Ness by placing the remains of 2 victims in full view of his office in City Hall and sending him postcards. 2. Jack the Ripper, London, England. 1888. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who targeted female prostitutes in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London in 1888. The killer's modus operandi typically involved cutting the throats of his victims before mutilating their abdomens, with the removal of internal organs suggesting anatomical or surgical knowledge. The name Jack the Ripper originated from a letter disseminated in the press, and extensive newspaper coverage bestowed widespread notoriety on the killer. Despite an investigation into 11 murders committed in the area between 1888 and 1891, only 5 victims are commonly considered to be linked to Jack the Ripper. The murders were never solved, and the legend of Jack the Ripper became a combination of historical research, folklore, and pseudo-history that continues to capture public imagination to this day. 1. The Zodiac Killer. Northern California, United States. 1960s to 1970s. The Zodiac Killer is an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. He murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969 and claimed to have killed 37 people. He targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver. The Zodiac communicated with newspapers through taunting letters and cards, in which he threatened killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed. Some of the letters included cryptograms, in which the killer claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. While many theories regarding the identity of the killer have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. The case remains unsolved and open in some jurisdictions. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the dark world of unsolved serial killer mysteries. We hope that this video has piqued your interest and inspired you to delve deeper into the fascinating and often chilling world of true crime. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And if you have any thoughts, comments, or theories about the cases we've discussed, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop seeking the truth.